In today's video, I'm going to be tackling one of the most common challenges faced by Google Ads advertisers, and that is understanding how well your campaigns compare to the top competitors in your market. If you're running any type of Google Ads campaigns and you want to get the most out of your ad spend, it's incredibly important to understand how your campaigns stack up against other competitors in your market. You need to be able to answer the question of how often do your ads appear in comparison to your competitors, how often do they appear at the top, and how often are your competitors' ads outranking you? Because with this knowledge, you can start to optimize your campaigns and better utilize your spend towards the keywords that you really want to go after. This is where the Auction Insights report comes into play. It's a predefined report that you can access through your Google Ads dashboard, and it provides a lot of different data around how your campaigns perform against other competitors in your market. I'm going to be walking you through each of the different columns in this report and explaining how you can interpret this data and use this information to gain a competitive edge in your campaigns. Alright, jumping into the Google Ads dashboard, you can access the Auction Insights report in the Insights and Reports tab. Just open that up and then click into Auction Insights. And then you'll need to select a campaign up here, and you can also filter by ad group. I'm just going to be focusing on the campaign level, and then you'll see all of these different columns here. There are some other ones we can add in just via a custom column, but for the purposes of this video, I'm just going to be focusing on these default columns. So what you'll see over to the left is all of the competitors that are competing in the same auctions as you, which means the target keywords that you're looking to show your ads for. These are all of the sites that are also appearing in that auction. And then obviously you can see your own URL as well. So I'm going to be basically working from left to right and talking through each of the columns and how you can interpret this data and how you can use this data to make more informed optimizations to your account. We're going to start with the impression share column, and basically your impression share is the percentage of times that your ads were shown out of the total eligible impressions in your auction. So essentially what that means is how often your ads appeared for the number of searches that were made for your target keywords. For example, in this case, we can see that our client had an impression share of 30, and I just have this sorted by highest to lowest. So we can see that we did have the highest impression share, and then we can also see specific competitors' impression shares as well. Now, this is a pretty basic column. All it shows us is how often our ads were visible to our potential customers and how often our competitors' ads were shown for the same auctions. Now, moving on to the overlap rate column, and personally, I find this one to be by far the most useful data point that you can get on your competition, because basically what it tells us is how often the competitors' ads appeared in the same auction as ours. So it's one of the best ways to see who your direct competitors are, because it will show you who appears the most often for the same keywords that you're targeting. So for example, if I wanted to see who my top competition is, I can sort this from highest to lowest, and I can see that these top 3 players here, they have the highest overlap rate, meaning that they are probably targeting the most similar keywords to my clients' ads. And from this, I can actually start to dive into their ad copies and see how I can differentiate myself in the market. Moving on to the position above rate column, as the name suggests, this basically shows you how often your competitors' ads appeared in a higher position than your ad in the search results page. So for example, with this top competitor here, we can see that they have a position above rate of 65.91%. Now, what this means is that when both of our ads were shown at the same time, their ad appeared in a higher position than ours 65% of the time. So this data is really useful for understanding how our ad position compares with our top competitors. And from this data, we can start to understand which competitors are consistently appearing above ours. And potentially we can start to make budget adjustments to be able to improve our position above rate. And this data is really useful for understanding how our ad position compares to our competitors. So by knowing which competitors are consistently appearing above ours, we can start to make budget and bid adjustments to be able to outrank them as well. Next up, we have top of page rate, and this one is really straightforward. It's how often your ads appeared at the top of the results page above the organic listings. So typically you would see 4 sponsored ads above the organic listings, but this may vary depending on the keyword. Now, this is actually a really important metric because for most campaigns, you want your ads appearing at the top of the results page above the organic listings. Obviously, this will vary depending on your budget and your objectives, but for almost all lead generation campaigns, you want your ads in the top positions as often as possible because that's going to maximize your chances of getting a conversion and a higher click-through rate. Your top of page rate is based on quite a few variables. So things like your budget, your bids, and your quality score will typically have a strong influence on how often your ads appear at the top of page. So you want to make sure you have those squared away. Usually, if you have a good quality score and your bids are competitive, you should be able to maintain a fairly decent top of page rate. But again, it depends on your competitors, and that's why it's really important to be able to understand this data. So for example, in this case, we can see that this top competitor here has a top of page rate of 87%, whilst ours is 73%. So there's a good chance that we're consistently being outranked by these competitors above us, which could potentially be pushing us out of the top 4 in certain auctions. So by understanding this data, we can start to make adjustments to our campaigns. The next column we're going to talk about is the absolute top of page rate. And similar to the top of page rate, the only difference is that we're talking about the absolute top, which is the first position that appears in the search results page. So for example, we can see that our ads appear in the first position 26% of the time, and the top competitor appears in the very top 40% of the time. So similar to top of page rate, your absolute top of page rate is determined by your budgets, your bids, and your quality score. And ultimately, it comes down to your campaign objectives and the total budget that you're willing to allocate to your campaign to appear on the absolute top position. Because in some cases, you may find that you'll get better results just appearing in the top of page rate because you are able to appear more often, as opposed to trying to target that absolute top of page rate position where it will cost you more per click. So you may appear less often, but when you do, you appear in the top of the page position. So it really just comes down to what your objectives are and what you find gets you better results from your ads. Now that we understand what each of these columns means and the different data sets that they represent, we can start to zoom out and start to interpret this report to come up with some actionable insights and specific items that we can work on to improve our competitive positioning in the market. So I've gone back to the last 90 days of data, and I'm just going to sort this by top of page rate. So what we can see here is that these top 4 competitors here, they have an extremely high top of page rate, which as a reminder is the top 4 positions. So how often our ads are appearing above the organic listings. These 4 competitors here have a top of page rate above 80%. But what we can see is that their impression share is actually very, very low. So how we would interpret this is that basically it's telling us that they appear in the top 4 positions most of the time, but they're only bidding on very specific keywords. Now, if we look at these websites, just from the name, we can tell this top one here is focused on implants. So we know that they're going to be focusing on implant related keywords. So they're bidding really aggressively on those specific keywords, and it's a very narrow set of keywords. But their objective is to appear in top of page rate for those specific keywords. So these 4 competitors here, immediately we know that they're not going to be a super big concern for us because they're only competing for a small set of keywords. But it's important for us to note that if we did, for example, if we wanted to rank higher for implants, we wanted to gain a competitive edge above them, then we know we need to spend a fair bit higher to be able to gain a higher ad rank. But for now, it's just something to keep in mind that we know that these 4 websites here are only bidding on a select set of keywords. Now, if we filter this through by overlap rate, the top competitor here will be the most similar competitor to our website, meaning that they're targeting a very similar set of keywords. And we can see that their impression share is 28%, ours is 31%, and that they appear about 43% of the time in the same auction. So almost half of the same set of keywords that we're targeting. We can see that they above appear above our ads 51% of the time, and they're at the top of the page 79% of the time. So for our understanding, it's actually very important to note that this particular website would be the most important and relevant competitor that we need to keep an eye on, because they are very high in terms of overlap rate, and they would be appearing in most of our auctions. So it's important for us to review their website and review their ad copies to be able to try and work out what differentiation we can make to our copies to be able to compete with this particular website. And this one really is very, very important because it is the most similar competitor to us. Now, as we go down this list, we can see even the second one here, they have an overlap rate of 24%. Again, a very high top of page rate. So if we do want to appear higher for a large set of our keywords, we know that we're going to be competing with these two sites here. And then as you go down this list, they become less and less specific to your site. So again, it's just something that you need to be mindful of, but you know that these competitors aren't going to be your biggest sort of hindrance in terms of improving your impression share overall. But yeah, as we can see, most of these actually have a impression share below 10%. So just from this data set alone over the last 90 days, we know that these three sites here would be the ones that we would need to investigate further and see how we can start to improve our competitive positioning.